to play. Warriors, come out to play.
Mysteriously, the audio just gets cut out. And not only that, but the topic tonight is all about the Rife Machine. And believe it or not, I have been in communication with Matthew Rife, who is the great-nephew of Royal Rife. And the show tonight is all about them and what has been built. And they were told that I was told that the FBI continues to contact Matthew Rife and his machine. And on top of that, we made a deal and he sent me the machine. And so it's coming to my house and we are going to do a continual show on how it's affecting my son, Oliver. So there's no wonder why I have technical difficulties, because this is a spiritual war. And the devil doesn't like when you heal people, especially when you mess with his medicine companies, pharmacia. And this is what we're going through. This is unfortunately the problem. However, nothing's going to stop me. They're going to have to kill me, okay? And I'm telling you right now, I'm not suicidal. Nothing's going to stop me. And like I've said before, when I told Satan, you're on alert. Excuse me. Ooh. I told Satan, you're on notice. And I am judging angels. That's what my role is. And I will be judging angels. And therefore, you continue to attack me. When you're in the hot seat, it's going to be up to me and my testimony if you go into the lake of fire or not. So that's what I say. And God help anyone who stands in my way, especially the Secret Service who thinks that this show is a matter of national security. God help them. You see, when you go against a pastor who's anointed, you'd be surprised at the problems that person faces. You don't do that, okay? Now, witchcraft, they don't realize that when they do witchcraft upon an anointed, when they do their witchcraft and spells, the Bible says it's going back, bouncing back, and it goes back to them sevenfold. So what they try to do to you, they get it returned sevenfold. And believe it or not, there have been witches who have tried to attack me, and they chose Jesus Christ because all of their spells didn't work, and it screwed them and their channel beings that they were in love with, their channel beings. Well, they turned on them. Well, isn't that interesting? That's just how it works. You don't go against God's anointed. The Bible shows all the examples of what happened if you decide to go against the anointed. Now you say, well, they killed Jesus. Well, Jesus let it happen. Okay? He let it happen. It's a big difference. And he had to, because he had to pay the atonement. He had to follow all of the psycho, crazy 613 Jewish laws in order to be a perfect specimen, so Satan couldn't find one fault in him to keep him in hell. Therefore, he paid the atonement, set everyone free. All right, well, we're back. So let's get into breaking shitty, crappy breaking news, huh? How about that?
Welcome to Shitty Breaking News with your host, James Carner, offering his shitty opinion.
It is. Trump and Xi meeting. How did we get here? Well, I think how we got here is China has been playing evil like America does. And China has had this monopoly on rare earth material for so long that China decided to tell all the other countries that they have agreements with to stop shipping rare earth minerals to America. And apparently Trump got the news on his desk by one of the countries leaking the document that China sent. So Trump is going after them. That's what's happening. And this is why Trump is in Venezuela with warships. Because Trump is now saying, no, ain't going to happen. This is all from the Orsini family, who are giving Trump the full power to go after the Lee family. For some reason, I don't know why, but the Orsini family were, well, behind on the death toll. And they had to make it up. So Israel decided to go after Gaza. They got themselves a good million. And maybe that caught up with Lee. You got to understand, guys, when these people kill people, okay, when these countries murder people through war, disease, famine, just genetically modified food, when they kill people, that spirit of that person will either belong to God or it'll belong to Satan, one or the other. Now, the Bible says when we breathe out, our breath goes back to God. But Satan's been hijacking that breath, as I showed you in my book, Breath War. But the spirituality of the ritual killing is those that died under the hands of the Lees or Orsinis. It gives the family or dynasty power. And the whole reason why China caught up so fast in power is because they killed 1 billion of their own people. Because 1 billion of their people mysteriously vanished, and they said it's because of their one-child policy. Right. No, they killed 1 billion of their citizens to catch up with the spark of life that the Orsinis had over them. So maybe they're now even, and they've got to kill more to get that balance of power. And from what I understand, because they're all working for the Bank for International Settlements, they're all reporting to the fallen angels there. Well, they're trying to get everyone even, so everyone will accept the CBDC. Go on to central bank digital currency, which ones and zeros, which isn't worth crap, but it will bring full control to both families, Orsini and Lee. Hurricane Melissa kills at least 30 people in the Caribbean as it crosses the Bahamas. Yes, we mentioned last night it's a terrible, terrible storm, unfortunately, but the only thing we could do, folks, is pray for those people. Pray those people find shelter, especially those in Haiti and in Jamaica. It's on its way. And ironically, the Caribbean is where we sent our warship, our Navy warship, not the warship, but the aircraft carrier. I wonder if that has anything to do with, maybe did China turn on their weather machines and, they're trying to get all of America's war machines out? I don't know. Trump orders Pentagon to begin testing nuclear weapons immediately. Well, turns out Russia did a really smart move, in my opinion. They just released that they have a nuclear warhead, nuclear missile that can fly around it forever until it strikes. So basically, here's the deal. Usually these ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, their job is to fly at least, 3,500 miles or 4,000 miles or 7,000 miles. But after that, they run out of fuel. But Russia just came out with nuclear missiles. Okay? The coolest thing I've ever heard. I know, and it's evil. I get it, but it's a missile powered by nuclear mechanics. So this missile, once they launch the missile, it could just circle the globe until Russia decides, all right, go ahead and attack our target. Yeah. A nuclear-powered nuclear missile. I've never thought I'd see anything like that, but that's what Russia has. And so, yeah, Trump is like, oh, shit. We need to start testing nuclear weapons immediately. Well, looks like we're back into the Cold War, aren't we, folks? Sheila says many Caribbean people are saying they're trying to kill the dragon and aiming for the mouth. Apparently, it's common knowledge there. Interesting. For one night, Vance takes Charlie Kirk's place on the college campus debate. Okay, have fun. Majority of California likely voters say they support Proposition 50, the poll shows. Sure they do. Isn't Proposition 50 where they're going to do some more gerrymandering? Yeah. And ABC News is saying, yeah, but the majority of Californians really, the voters, they support Proposition 50. Sure they do. Sure they do. Believe me, most of the voters have lost complete faith in both the left and the right system. So, good on the voters, except if you're really just completely dependent on the state, you're going to vote left 100% because that's where you get your paycheck. Well, all that's going to change here. Who knows how long the government's going to be shut down? I'm telling you, this is going to be a long game of chicken. The cars are heading towards each other. Who's going to flinch? Is it going to be the Republicans or the Democrats? Well, I say it doesn't matter because both sides are controlled by the bankers. South Korea gives Trump a crown weeks after the No Kings protest. So no kings, and then Trump gets a crown from South Korea. Oh my God. Look, Trump's not the Antichrist. I know you want him to be because you're all tired. But dude, we've only just begun. This is just the beginning of Jacob's trouble. Things are going to get worse and worse and worse. Okay? Until the baby pops out. The baby is the actual real Antichrist who is given a false breath. Who that's going to be, I don't know. But I don't think it's going to happen between now and the next few years. I think it's going to be in the next 115 years, just judging off of what Jesus said. I could be wrong. And that's okay too. And it doesn't hurt to be prepped and ready for Jesus' return. However, before then, just know that God's got this. Every Christian on this planet is going to be just fine. It's those who don't believe in God are going to have the most problems on earth because, well, earth is controlled by the principalities, okay? Especially one prince of the entire world, not the king, but the prince. And that's what the Bible calls, well, the Bible calls him Satan, but the Ethiopian canon calls him Belial. And that is breaking news. All right, we're going to go to a quick commercial when we get back. We're going to be talking about the frequency war, Royal Raymond Suppression, and the return of healing by breath.
Next to nothing in taxes? Nelson Rockefeller quoted, "The secret to success is to own nothing but control everything." Basically, when you own something in your name, you also own the liabilities. Introducing the solution. Begin an unincorporated association and remove assets out of your name while remaining in control and management of them. An unincorporated association is a state-registered entity that you can put assets into, is member-based and not tied to your name, has a tax-exempt EIN number, and is private and not found when doing online search. Whether you receive a 1099 or K1 under your name, consider setting up your own unincorporated association and allow the association to be the owner of your assets and free yourself from the burden of personal tax liability. Our clients are saving tens of thousands of dollars on taxes every year for the rest of their lives. Book a call with us and find out how we can do the same for you.
All right, we're back to the show. Have you guys ever heard of Royal Rife? Have you ever heard of the Rife Machine? R-I-F-E, Rife? Well, I've heard of it And I've known many of my listeners have asked me if I've ever tried it. Now, I've never bought it, never tried it, but I can tell you there are hundreds of fake Rife machines that are out there, especially in India. They make a ton of them in India. I don't know if they follow the same protocols as Royal Rife, but over the past few weeks, I was introduced to Matthew Rife, the great-nephew of Royal Rife, and he is going to be shipping me an actual Rife machine and to see if we can help my son from his self-injurious behavior. So we're going to do a show with Matthew Rife after I receive the machine and go and talk to him and find out, how he got started, how he got into what his great uncle was working on. And we're going to find out all kinds of shenanigans that the government has been doing by constantly contacting him and trying to keep him on a leash. Well, if his thing doesn't work, why bother? And so that gives me more hope in this machine that it actually will do something for my son. Now, it is really made for destroying those parasitic cancer parasites. But he's been told that the machine has actually done wonders in autism. So that's what I'm really interested in. So we're gonna have many shows with Matthew Rife, and we're gonna be following up with that over the next few weeks. In fact, I do know that Matthew's going on vacation for a couple weeks, and when he gets back, we're going to be talking to him, and I'm going to show you guys the stages of how Oliver's doing, and hopefully we can get somewhere, in that. I'm guessing, but is RR Royal Rife? I don't know. RR1114 is that you, Matthew? I don't know. All right, so here is tonight the frequency war, the Royal Rife suppression, and the return of the healing by breath. Now, remember, we wrote a book about breath. When you breathe in, that's when God gives you the spark of life. When you breathe out, it's supposed to go back up as an offering to God. And, well, that's not what's happening. I told you in my book, Breath War, that Satan has been stealing the breath so it doesn't go back up to God. So things aren't working out like that. But I have told you guys how to say a prayer and stop the devil from stealing it from us. So that's something that we'll be talking about for the rest of my life, is because, the book is real, it's true, and according to the Ethiopian canon, it's backed up everything that I have been talking about before I even was introduced to it. So they taught us that healing comes in a bottle. Remember? It comes in a bottle. Or healing will come from a pill. Well, right after Rockefeller changed modern medicine from plants to crude oil, they said, take this pill, this will heal you. And then they said healing will come by a blade. Okay, that to get better, we must first surrender to insurance codes, white coats, and the approved pharmakia of the beast. But the scripture, it says otherwise. It does. They tell us that healing was spoken, that it was breathed, and that it was sung. Meaning, God, when he created us, he's singing. That's what I believe. Now, Jesus did not prescribe, he declared. He touched. He called life out of death with frequency and authority. Right? And there was a man in our own time who came dangerously close to doing the same. RR says, no, I'm not Royal Rife. Okay, all right, just making sure. But I did hear that Matthew said he was going to try to catch the show, so that'd be nice. Now, this man who came dangerously close was Royal Raymond Rife. He was not a prophet, but he saw the invisible. He was not a healer, but he actually restored life. Trained in optics and electricity, he built a microscope so powerful it could see viruses alive in real time. something science still denies. But Rife did not stop there. He went further. He's a scientist. Back in the 20s, he discovered that every disease-causing organism has a specific mortal oscillatory rate. We all vibrate. So do parasites. A frequency at which it self-destructs. Yeah, I believe we have those type of machinery or weapons in the military to make someone oscillate to death. I believe we have that. Now, he then tuned his machine to that frequency and destroyed what pharmacia could only manage. Okay? Bacteria actually shattered using the Rife machine. Cancer cells collapsed. Pain went away. It fled. And the registry of the human body, well, its frequency, its code, began to correct itself. And that's when they came. The AMA, the FDA, the Syndicate of Sickness. They offered him wealth if he'd sell it to them, but he refused. So they took everything else. They raided his lab, confiscated his instruments, destroyed his manuscript. This is all on paper. This is real. There's many books on it. His allies died under strange circumstances, heart attacks out of the blue. His name was erased from textbooks, and his invention, the Rife Machine, was labeled quackery, despite curing terminal patients in front of doctors. Why? Well, because the machine worked. And when something works outside of their control, it must be demonized, dismantled, and disappeared. Because sickness is not a misfortune in this world. It is a business. It's a monthly reoccurring subscription. And healing that bypasses their system is a threat to the throne of pharmacia. But God, he keeps receipts. And frequencies do not die. And this is where the story picks up again, but not in a lab, but in a bloodline. Matthew Rife, Royal's great-nephew, found the journals of his great-uncle, the truth, and the technology. And he rebuilt it. But not just as a machine, but as a testimony. He is the remnant from that lineage, the echo of a silenced voice. And he has sent the machine to me, not for profit, not for publicity, but for healing. I'm going to be holding it in my hands here shortly, within a few days. I'm going to be using it on my son. Now, my boy, whom I have carried through fire and despair, who the system labeled and wrote off, whose breath I have contended for in the courts of heaven, I have watched him lie under the complete sorcery of the devil through what's considered self-harm. I've watched him suffer. I've watched him be miserable as he would do self-harm to himself. And I am looking forward to seeing if his machine will literally change our lives. Now, autism and self-injurious behavior are pretty common for teenage boys. It's pretty common. And I'm not here to worship technology, okay? I mean, if this does work, I'm going to be talking about it all the time because it's going to change our home. And I don't think it's going to heal autism, but I do think it may give him some relief. But I do not reject the tools that align with what Matthew has been making. Now, the Rife machine does not override God. It honors what God encoded. It does not replace healing by faith. It aids the realignment of the registry that faith already activates. Believe me, there wouldn't be Christians left on earth if there wasn't a hospital. That's how much faith we have in our own God. Believe me. And yet, even now, the government watches. The FBI still calls Matthew Rife, asking questions, probing, intimidating. Why? Because the threat remains. Because a healed population is an uncontrollable population. Because when the temple of the body is restored, the priests of pharmacia lose their altar. So this episode is not just about a machine. We don't worship the machine. We give thanks to God for people like Royal Rife and his great-nephew, Matthew, to create machines that can heal us when our faith isn't there. This is about a war that's been going on humankind ever since Rockefeller took over modern medicine. This is a war over breath. This is a war over resonance, over who has the right to define healing. The scriptures say he sent his word and healed them. Well, that's frequency. Would you not agree? The word is vibration. It's hard to understand it because, well, we don't see Jesus. He's there. He's just vibrating way faster than you could ever see. It's frequency. And the walls of Jericho, it fell to sound. Remember, the Jews would just march around the whole city and they would hum a certain tune and bang their cymbals and drums, and then the wall came crumbling down. Frequency. Ezekiel prophesied breath into dry bones. David cast demons out with a harp. Jesus said to Lazarus, hey, come forth. And the tomb obeyed. He got up. He was down there in Abraham's bosom, staring over into hell, which is another part of that area. The power of life and death is not in the syringe. It is in the sound. So today I speak not just as a host or a father or a researcher. I'm speaking as a witness to what was buried and now returns, a witness to the remnant frequency of healing that this world tried to erase. And I say, let the registry be restored. Let the temple of the body be reclaimed. Let the breath remember its design, and let the beast tremble at the return of what it tried to silence, the truth. This is the frequency war. And the remnant, you and I, we're waking up. Now, Royal Raymond Rife was not a mystic or a healer in the traditional sense. He was an inventor. He was a machinist and a disciplined observer of life's smallest enemies. He was born in 1888 in Elkhorn, Nebraska. Rife possessed a mind far ahead of his time. Where others were bound by the visible, Rife was obsessed with the invisible. He believed that light and sound were not just byproducts of existence, but the tools by which existence itself could be manipulated. He did not merely theorize, he built. He constructed microscopes that could magnify viruses live, watch them in motion, without staining or killing them. Now, modern science still pretends this cannot be done. Oh, you can see him. But Rife did it in the 1920s using prisms, quartz optics, and variable wavelengths that bent the rules of physics. And with his microscope, Rife began studying diseases. And what he saw changed everything. Each pathogen had a unique signature, a resonance, a mortal oscillatory rate that, when matched, could rupture its membrane and destroy it without harming surrounding tissue. This is the stuff that they use to break apart the rocks inside your body, the calcium rocks that come out of your organs. You know what I'm talking about? When you pass a calcium rock, you know what I'm talking about? They use vibration to break up the calcium rocks. There's a name for it. It's escaping me right now. But this is the exact same principle, just tuned differently. Rupture its membrane and destroy it without harming surrounding tissue. And he did not burn or poison. He just vibrated the cancer, killed it. And using electromagnetic frequencies broadcast through plasma tubes, Royal Rife began to treat bacterial and viral infections. And when he applied these targeted frequencies to cancer cells, they began to die. Now, in 1934, under clinical observation by a team of medical doctors from the University of Southern California, Rife treated 16 terminal cancer patients. And within 90 days, 14 of them were fully cured. The remaining 2 recovered after a few additional weeks of frequency tuning. Kidney stones. Thank you, Texas. Kidney stones breaking up by oscillators. Well, why not break up and kill viruses? So these were not vague antidotes. This is written. This has been recorded, it's been logged, and it's been verified. And yet this breakthrough never reached the public. Why? Because Rife's approach could not be patented. It could not be bottled or sold in pharmacies. It threatened to collapse the entire business model of 20th century medicine. The American Medical Association, under the leadership of Morris Fishbein, offered Rife money in partnership, but he refused. And what followed was a brutal campaign of suppression. Labs were raided, equipment was stolen, researchers died mysteriously. The 1934 cancer clinic records vanished. Where'd they go? And Rife, once celebrated, was driven into obscurity, accused of quackery, and eventually silenced. Yet what he discovered remains absolutely true. Every disease has a signature. Every cell sings. The rocks sing to God. The Bible says it. And the body, when struck with the right frequency, can be tuned back into harmony. Now, Royal Rife's machines were not cures in themselves. They were instruments of realignment. They worked with the body's registry, not against it. They respected design. And this part of the story is not just historical, it is prophetic, because when God raises up a man to expose the darkness, the system always tries to bury him. But truth vibrates at a frequency that cannot be permanently silenced. And in this war, this frequency war, the first note was struck by Royal Rife. Now, to understand the full magnitude of Royal Rife's invention, we must abandon the pharmaceutical worldview that healing is only real when it is invasive, painful, or chemical. Royal Rife's machine, his frequency generator, operated in a paradigm older than modern medicine, one more aligned with the physics of heaven than the economy of hospitals. It healed by vibration, not incision, by resonance, not drugs. It didn't fight the body, it helped the body remember the pitch it was born to carry. And at its core, the Rife Machine was based on the theory that every organism, healthy or malignant, has a natural frequency at which it vibrates. When you match that frequency and amplify it, you don't just agitate the organism, you shatter it, like an opera singer breaking a glass. This phenomenon, called mortal oscillatory rate, become the foundation of Rife's protocol. He mapped frequencies for cancer, tuberculosis, typhus, syphilis, and dozens of other conditions. But unlike today's treatments that indiscriminately attack both healthy and diseased cells, Rife's technology was scalpel precise, targeting only the invaders, leaving the body's design untouched. The machine itself used a plasma tube filled with inert gases like argon and helium that emitted radiant frequencies into the surrounding space. Patients didn't need to be hooked up or cut open. They simply sat near the device while the frequencies passed harmlessly through the body, seeking and destroying pathogens with surgical exactness because he had it tuned to the right frequency. Rife wasn't just treating symptoms. He was retuning the human instrument. He was honoring the body's blueprint, not rewriting it. Like they're trying to do with modern mRNA gene therapy drugs. This kind of healing, non-invasive, non-chemical, non-commercial, terrified the gatekeepers of modern medicine. Pharmaceutical companies saw no profit in a machine that could be reused indefinitely without ongoing purchases. Hospitals saw no billing codes for resonant healing. The AMA saw a threat to its monopoly on treatment standards. And the machine didn't just work, it bypassed the entire structure of monetized suffering. Kind of like what Edison did to Tesla. Well, where do you put the meter? In one of the most remarkable and well-documented events in American medical history, Rife and his associates treated 16 terminal cancer patients. 14 declared cured. And yet no national headlines followed, no Nobel Prize, no mass production of the technology. Instead, a wall of silence and then retaliation. The machine worked by cooperating with the body's registry. The encoded frequencies and divine harmonics that govern how cells replicate, how blood flows, how breath speaks into flesh. Rife was not practicing alternative medicine. He was rediscovering original medicine, a language written into the fabric of creation long before the first pill was swallowed. In a world obsessed with molecular dissection and biochemical warfare against the body, Rife was calling us back to the design, to the voice print of health itself. In fact, some say that he was looking into the good and bad frequencies to find out are there good frequencies, are there bad frequencies? Now, what if, this is my opinion, what if there are bad frequencies that are being put throughout our bodies that are causing these types of diseases? I believe there are. I don't think 5G, 6G, and these cell towers are healthy for the resonance that God created us. And that is what made his invention so dangerous. Not the box of wires and tubes, but the idea that we are not broken machines, that disease is not always a random biochemical failure, but sometimes a disharmony, a fallen note in a divine song. And if disease is dissonance, then healing can be resonance. That truth, if accepted, would overthrow the very priesthood of modern medicine. So they struck, they attacked, The AMA, led by Morris Fishbein, demanded control. And when Rife refused to sell out, his laboratory was mysteriously raided. His files were disappeared. His microscopes that he made were stolen. Then his partners died. How did that happen? His reputation was systematically dismantled by articles, the media, labeling him a fraud. Even his suppressed testimonies and patient records confirmed his success. This is true. I looked it up. I won't put anything on my show unless I have double the sources. The medical machine did not confront him with science. It confronted him with bureaucracy and silence, the twin weapons of institutional control. And yet, even in exile, Rife's work survived quietly through the testimonies of those who were healed. You can't shut up a rumor. You can't shut people up from a testimony. Through handwritten notes passed down through modified machines and garage-built replicas, people took the stuff and made their own. And now, through the bloodline of his family, it rises again. Thank God. And what Royal Rife built was not just a machine. It was a challenge to darkness, a tuning fork of rebellion in a world addicted to pharmacia. And like any good tuning fork, its sound still lingers, vibrating through time, calling the remnant to remember that the word was spoken, and what was spoken can be sung again. Now, when the results of Rife's machine began leaking out, these quiet miracles whispered from clinic to clinic, testimony to testimony, the powers that ruled medicine did not offer praise. They launched a war, not a war of science, but a war of silencing. Not a debate of data, but a suppression of salvation. Rife had broken the unwritten law of the beast system. Healing must be profitable, repeatable, and patented, or it must be destroyed. And the American Medical Association, under the leadership of Fishbein, they moved swiftly. Now, Morris Fishbein was no scientist. He was a media mogul who transformed the AMA from a guild into an empire. And Rife's technology threatened the empire's altar, pharmaceutical revenue. If frequency could cure what surgery and pills could not, the entire house of cards, the hospitals, the drug companies, the cancer institutes, would tremble or completely fall apart. So Fishbein made his offer. Sell the rights, surrender the machine, and become rich or be ruined. Well, again, Rife refused. He would not be commercialized. He would not commercialize suffering. He would not place healing into the hands of an elite priesthood. He wanted to give the machine to the people, not to the patent office. That's when the doors began to close. Clinics were raided. Papers vanished. Rife's lab was broken into, folks. That was illegal. And of course, we didn't do it. That's my impression of the cigar-smoking bigwigs, the bankers. That's the bankers. His equipment was smashed. His microscopes capable of seeing viruses alive without staining them, a feature still not duplicated by conventional optics right now, was destroyed. Colleagues were threatened, bribed, and in some cases found dead. In 1944, the Journal of the Franklin Institute published one of the few surviving scientific validations of Rife's instruments, only to be buried without circulation. The FDA, Federal Drug Administration, entered the fray next, labeling any use of his machine as illegal under unapproved medical devices. And then raids followed. Machines were confiscated, technicians jailed, patients left untreated. Healing had become a crime. Even those holistic healers now are considered quacks. You know, those who came up with CBD oils and all kinds of different things that Mother Nature provides, non-GMO, that actually heals the body and helps people through pain. This was the Inquisition of modern medicine, with the scalpel replacing the stake and the bureaucracy replacing the burning. And like all inquisitions, it masked fear with authority. Well, we know it's best. White Club. The fear that the people might awaken to the idea that healing was never meant to be hidden behind insurance codes and hospital walls, but carried in the very breath and blueprint of the body that was made by God Almighty. Royal Rife died alone in 1971, impoverished and shamed, just like Tesla. Declared a crank by the system he once tried to serve and help and love. Believe me, his technology, his work is what Jesus told us to do. Love your neighbor. But in death, his story refused to fade. Why? Because a real testimony moves mountains, and he had dozens of them, if not hundreds, if not maybe thousands. We just don't know. We'll have to ask Matthew when we interview him. But in death, his story refused to fade. Files actually resurfaced, machines reassembled, survivors spoke, and a remnant carried the spark. And now, decades later, his own bloodline answers the call. Now, today, Matthew Rife, Royal's great-nephew, does not work in a laboratory surrounded by prestige. You know, the bankers, profit. He operates in the trenches, in homes, in hidden clinics, with the frequency generator nearly identical to the one that healed the incurable. He has changed it, because now there's all kinds of frequencies going through the airs than there was before, when the only thing that was going through the airwaves back then were just the radio towers. Now we've got all kinds of things, and he's had to tweak it, because that's the point. The more frequencies you have out there, the harder it is to find the frequency to kill this stuff. And the suppression has not ended. According to Matthew, the FBI has called him repeatedly. Not with warrants, but with warnings, veiled threats, curious questions, legal ambiguity. Why? Because the machine still works. Because the registry is still real. Because the darkness still fears light that it cannot profit from. So we are witnessing the second wave of suppression, but not by fire, but by confusion. The medical machine now uses language as its scalpel. Disinformation, blah, 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 dangerous, blah, 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 unapproved, blah, blah, blah. They don't have to burn machines if they can convince the public they are fake. But truth resonates, it vibrates, and it cannot be silenced. And the testimonies are rising again. The Rife Machine is not just a relic, it is a revolution not just in medicine, but in spiritual perception. And it reminds us that the system we trusted to heal has become a gatekeeper of sickness. And it forces us to ask, if healing has always been this simple, this beautiful, and this accessible, who benefits from keeping us broken? Who? The bankers. They're the real threat to this world. The central bankers. Not your local credit bank. Call them credit bank. It's not them. It's the ones that they report all of their earnings to. The central bank, the Federal Reserve. and the other 83 central banks worldwide that all report to the Bank for International Settlements. Feed, feed, feed. Royal Rife did not have children, but his legacy didn't end in the grave. It traveled through bloodlines, memory, and the call of destiny. And his great-nephew, Matthew Rife, was not born into the scientific establishment, nor was he handed the blueprints by an academic institution. He was called, drawn, like a tuning fork to the sound he had not yet heard but already recognized in his own bones. Matthew didn't just inherit a family name, he inherited a spiritual mandate. Resurrect what they tried to bury. The path wasn't romantic. It was filled with resistance, obscurity, and spiritual warfare. Matthew didn't step into a polished laboratory. He entered a battlefield strewn with misinformation, legal threats, and decades of slander. It has not been fun for him. And the Rife name had been tarnished by the medical gatekeepers and scrubbed from textbooks. Most people who heard it thought of pseudoscience, not prophecy. But Matthew kept digging. He tracked down surviving notes, original schematics, sworn testimonies from 1934, and the rare few who had worked alongside his great uncle in those hidden years. And through trial and error and what he himself calls divine prompting, Matthew began building and refining a modern version of the original Rife frequency generator. It's not a cheap knockoff built for sales, but a true heir to the lost registry, a machine attuned to life-giving frequencies, not corporate protocols. And when he activated it, not in a clinical trial, but in a living room, on children, on the chronically ill, something began to happen. People reported healing. Chronic conditions softened. Inflammation receded. Sleep returned. Tumors shrank. And in Matthew's own words, the machine was never meant to heal alone. It required belief, alignment, and spiritual cooperation. The frequencies, he said, were not just mechanical. They were resonant echoes of the original word. The spoken architecture of life itself. And when tuned correctly, the machine amplified what God already encoded in the body. That's when the calls began, not from clients, but from federal agents. Matthew has described in private interviews and online forums that the FBI contacted him multiple times. In fact, when I spoke to him, he said he'd just gone off the phone with the FBI again. Not with formal investigations, but with veiled inquiries. What are you doing with this technology? How many people are you treating? Where did you get your schematics? They weren't wellness checks. They were warnings disguised as curiosity. They echoed the same playbook used against Royal Rife nearly a century ago, only this time they wore digital suits instead of trench coats. Matthew's refusal to register his machine with the FDA has placed him in a legal gray zone, and that's by design. To register it would be to submit it to the very structure that destroyed his great uncle. To surrender it would be to give away the last unchained healing modality still in the hands of the people. And like his predecessor, Matthew has chosen resistance over recognition, truth over tenure. And he doesn't sell mass units. He sends them to the faithful. Those who understand the risk and responsibility. I've spoken to him. He has a big heart. And he trains them in how to use frequencies for their children, for those abandoned by the system. And now, through his connection to this show, the very machine he's sending me, I believe, is going to help my son. I believe that Matthew's voice is about to reach the registry of the remnant. Not to make a profit, but to make a stand. This isn't about family heritage. It's about blood memory. You know, we all belong to the bloodline of Adam, the bloodline of Seth. that some truths are so encoded in the bloodline, that when evil attempts to erase them, they return in greater power through the children. And what Matthew carries isn't just a machine, it is a seed of Eden, vibrating again in a world of Babylonian medicine. He carries the breath. He carries the sound. And now through frequency, the remnant may be healed, not by cutting or drugs, but by the registry itself. Now, the ancient world, the word pharmakia didn't mean medicine. It actually meant sorcery. And the root of our word, pharmaceutical, is born from the same Greek term found in Revelations 18:23, where the merchants of the earth deceived the nations through their sorceries. Now, what Royal Rife unlocked with his frequency machine wasn't a new technology. It was actually restoration, a retuning of the body to God's original frequencies. And for a system rooted in pharmakia, that kind of healing is an existential threat. Existential. Oh, sometimes I'm the word meister. Pharmaceutical medicine is built on a model of repeatable revenue, not permanent solution. It treats symptoms to sustain markets. Side effects become new diseases, spawning new drugs. It is not a healing system. It is a business model dressed in lab coats. And the Rife machine does not require subscriptions, prescriptions, or proprietary enzymes. It does not sedate, numb, or suppress. It resonates. And resonance does not obey the FDA. And what the modern sorcerers fear most is the public that realizes they were born in God's frequency, not into sickness. And Rife's machine reveals this dangerous truth, that the body already knows how to heal if you remove the noise and reintroduce the signal. The tuning fork becomes a weapon against the chaos. Now, in contrast, the pharmaceutical industry uses chemical distortion to bind us. It clogs receptors, disrupts cell communication, and tricks the mind into surrendering to artificial rhythms. And these drugs are designed not to cure, but to train the body to obey new masters. Not the registry of life, not the book of life, not the spark of life, but the regime of dependency. And this is why the frequency war is not metaphorical. It is literal. It's happening today. And people are still believing it too, because you pay one time for a machine that can heal you for life, and they're still dependent on going back to the doctor again to get new drugs, and again pay an extra $150 a month or more. Some drugs cost $1,500 to $2,500 a month. The body is an electrical instrument. Each organ has its tone. Every disease has its disruption, and Royal Rife proved that specific mortal oscillatory rates could destroy viruses and bacteria without harming the host. He cataloged them, he cured patients, and he did so without cutting or drugging, or even becoming rich. Pharmakia could not allow this. The medical cartel used its trinity, FDA, AMA, and the media, to drown Rife's truth in noise. But they couldn't kill the frequency. It lingered. And now the digital replication, that frequency can once again be played into bodies once considered homeless, hopeless, afraid, scared. Maybe it can help us tune ourselves back to God, who spoke us into existence through sound, vibration, which the Bible says he is love. Love sings us into being. Matthew Rife's version of the machine is not just a technological rival. It is a spiritual defiance of the beast system sorcery. And you live in the beast system. It's here. And this is why they call him. This is why the FBI watches. This is why disinformation campaigns get launched to anyone who shares their healing story online. But if frequency becomes faith and faith becomes action, the temple of pharmakia begins to crumble. And if the remnant awakens, you and me, If they unplug from the prescriptions and begin to tune themselves to the frequencies of creation, well, the sorcerers lose their power. The Rife machine is not just an invention, it is a forked blade, cutting between the pharmakia of Babylon and the resonance of Eden. It forces every listener to choose. Will you be medicated by sorcerers or harmonized by your creator? I see nothing wrong with that. The breath is not just air. It is the signature of life. The invisible ink God used to write your name into the registry of heaven. When Adam received breath, he became a living soul. And that breath had frequency. And that frequency had pattern. And that pattern was not random, it was divinely tuned. A cosmic resonance that made flesh animate and spirit permanent. When we breathe, we are not just exchanging gases. We are keeping time with the original word. We're even speaking God's name as we breathe. And Royal Rife never spoke in theological terms. He was a scientist, not a prophet. But his machine stumbled into something very ancient, very old. The reality that frequency governs the living. And that to restore health is to restore alignment with those primordial frequencies. And what he found in the lab was what Scripture had already declared in mystery. That everything living has its voice. That when that voice is out of tune, disease enters. But when it is restored, healing comes. I see no problem with that. Many legalistic Christians will go, because they got to pay their church their 10% of their tithings. No. There are too many people without the faith that need healed. I believe Jesus would bless this machine. And this is why the Rife machine in the hands of the remnant become more than just a device. It becomes a harp of David. If David's harp healed people, why can't this machine do the same? Blasphemous. I don't think so. A tool to cast out torment, to restore rhythm to the breath of a suffering child, to make the temple body resonate again with divine order. That's blasphemous? No. Each organ, each cell, each system responds not to just voltage, but to vibration. And the frequencies Royal Rife discovered and Matthew Rife now transmits are not mechanical in nature. They are registry alignments. They pull the body back into the page where its name was first written. I believe when Adam and Eve ate of the apple, whatever it was, I believe that's when things in the vibration changed. They could have slowed down their vibration. And that's where matter came in. I believe that the 7 heavens that are talked about in the Bible are different vibrations. Now, when a person sits before this machine, breathe, and frequency begins to interact, the body listens, the cells respond. Disruption, be it bacterial, viral, emotional, or spiritual, begins to collapse in the presence of resonance. In many cases, the user begins to weep or feel warmth. It's not biology, it's deliverance. As the machine plays the code of health, the body begins to remember Eden. And in remembering, it begins to reject Babylon. This is what the beast fears, that the registry might awaken in the body of man, that a nonverbal child, like my son, might begin to become calm again. That a person dismissed by doctors might begin to walk in strength again. That breath, properly aligned, might speak the name again. Not the chemical name, not the diagnosis, but the true name. The one the system tried to erase. The one that heaven remembers. That's Jesus Christ. So what we are seeing is not just healing, it is recovery of registry. The Rife machine does not cure, it reminds us. It sings into the bones. It calls the scattered pieces of man back into one accord. It does so through vibration. Just as God's voice once formed the worlds, let there be, is not past tense. It is present in every true frequency. And when the tuning is right, the registry sings again. This is why frequency is not just therapy. It is a prophetic act. When we sing to God, we're giving off a frequency. And a prophetic act is a declaration against the pharmakia, which is a refusal to forget the name, a decision to breathe in harmony with the kingdom of heaven. Now, in the age of data, information is power. And suppression is not merely the absence of truth, but the engineering of perception. The legacy of Royal Rife is not just forgotten, it is algorithmically buried. The machine that once lit up pathogens under a microscope and shattered cancer cells with the resonant frequencies now exists in the digital world as a whispered rumor labeled pseudoscience, dangerous, unproven. But who decides these labels? Who writes the code that silences one voice while elevating another? The answer is chillingly consistent. The same global technocrats and pharmaceutical giants who profit from sickness, dependency, and lifelong prescriptions. That's your United Nations, your WHO, and your Bank for International Settlements, all trying to get a new world order with their system of Babylon in place so that you are completely dependent on them and not dependent on Jesus Christ and machines that he gives us to help with our faith. Because that's what this machine does. Because even Matthew said that it may not work for those without faith. Well, bring it to me. I've got all the faith. The same corporate alliances that build search engines, social platforms, and medical databases now acts as the new Sanhedrin, issuing digital decrees about what can be said, sold, or believed. They speak with one mouth, backed by trusted sources like the FDA and CDC and WHO, and a long chain of fact-checking subsidiaries tied to Silicon Valley's advertising empire. But what they call trust is a veiled liturgical loyalty to Big Pharma. Rife's work is not merely ignored, it's targeted. And the very term Rife Machine triggers content moderation bots. In fact, you can't find his website. You have to go to Yandex just and type in Rife Machine. Then you find his website. Try selling one online, and your store may be flagged. Share a testimonial that dares mention cancer or virus in the same breath as frequency healing, and you'll be deplatformed. Even patient groups who gather to share logs of restored health are quietly throttled, pushed to the back pages, or dissolved without appeal. That's not medicine. That's doctrinal warfare, waged by a technocratic priesthood that fears resurrection. Not spiritual resurrection, but cellular, biological reawakening to design. And if people learn that their bodies can heal by tuning into divine frequencies, the entire financial model of sickness collapses. Hospitals become temples without offerings. Pills become obsolete. Control is lost. Matthew Rife, great-nephew of Royal Rife, lives at the epicenter of this storm. God bless him for standing up to the beast. Though he builds the machine quietly, updates the design, and sends it to the suffering, he is not left alone. The FBI calls, not once, but repeatedly. What are they asking? What is their concern? Are they curious about safety? No. Their true concern is influence. How many people are using this? What stories are being told? What frequency is spreading? Because in this war, testimony is the contagion. And that testimony cannot be digitally quarantined forever. The Rife Machine is not about rebellion, folks. It is about remembrance. We've had spiritual amnesia since we were born here. We don't remember Eden. And it remembers how the body was designed. Eden. And it remembers how the breath of God animates tissue. Eden. And it remembers that healing is not just possible, it's the default if the interference is removed. What Matthew offers is not a machine, it is a song. It will be singing to your body, the temple that needs this. A harmonic weapon that bypasses both pharmaceutical control and tech censorship. And that terrifies the beast system. Because when one person heals without a pill, they tell another. And when a nonverbal child calms down during treatment, the parents begin to speak. And when enough people speak, the algorithm breaks. And what once buried under layers of misinformation labels becomes a revival of resonance. And the registry begins to reawaken. And this is why censorship intensifies. And this is why gatekeepers panic. Because they cannot kill the frequency, only the frequency breakers. They cannot stop the healing, only the testimony. But we are entering a moment when the walls of censorship will fall like Jericho. Not because we shouted louder, but because we blew the trumpet of truth. The signal has already begun. There was a time when healing was inseparable from the Spirit. In the days of apostles, healing did not require a hospital, a diagnosis, or a drug. It required only faith, authority, and alignment with divine will. Jesus touched the leper, spoke to the fever, rebuked the spirit, and the body was made whole. Disease was not merely a malfunction of biology. It was a symptom of spiritual interference, of sin, oppression, or demonic influence. And the early church understood this. They anointed with oil, laid hands on the afflicted, and saw miracles flow from breath to belief. But as time passed and empires rose, the sacred was traded for science, the spiritual for the clinical. And what had once been called a spirit of infirmity became neurological disorder. And what was once possession became psychosis. We learned to label but not to cast out. And the war against spiritual torment was reframed as a medical issue, managed by pharmaceuticals, therapy, or, in worst cases, incarceration. Deliverance became an embarrassment, and yet the tormentors remained hidden beneath terms, treatments, and diagnosis. Then came Royal Rife, a man of science who didn't realize he was also brushing against the supernatural when he was doing his research. And in his effort to destroy disease by identifying the frequencies of resonance and pathogens, he stumbled onto a truth deeper than biology, that everything living or unclean has a frequency. And if that frequency can be matched and disrupted, the invader is shattered. So Rife used this insight to kill viruses, bacteria, parasites, and even kill cancer cells. But what neither he nor his critics fully understood was that some of the invisible enemies he was confronting were not just microbial. They were spiritual. The principalities, lords of the air. Today, as Matthew Rife resurrects the machine, users are reporting more than physical healing. They are describing strange reactions, wave of nausea that pass like exorcisms, sudden bursts of uncontrollable emotion, or a presence that lifts as if a shadow has been driven out. That's modern day deliverance. Some children with autism become calm for the first time. Some adults with chronic anxiety find a stillness that they've never known. Others report inexplicable phenomena, dark dreams ceasing, suicidal thoughts vanishing, or sensations of oppressive energy being lifted from the room. These are not side effects of medical treatment. These are signs of deliverance. Can a machine cast out demons? Well, not in the sense that Jesus did, but perhaps it can create an environment where darkness cannot remain. Just as light casts out shadows, so too can the right frequency shake loose the spiritual parasites that afflict the body. Now, in the Old Testament, David played the harp to drive the tormenting spirits from Saul. In Jericho, the Israelites blew the trumpet and strongholds fell. In modern times, the Rife Machine becomes a trumpet in the temple of the body, declaring to any unclean spirit, you do not belong here. And of course, the enemy knows this. The enemy always knows what threatens his dominion, and this is why the Rife Machine is suppressed, mocked, and banned. It is not simply because it challenges cancer treatment profits. It's because it threatens the entire sorcery industrial complex. The fusion of pharmakia, psychiatry, and sorcery that keeps humanity bound. The machine doesn't just threaten a billion-dollar cancer drug. It threatens the system that monetizes oppression. But there is a warning here. Not all frequencies are holy. Not all healing is righteous. The same technology that can harmonize a body with divine design can also enslave it to artificial resonance. We see it in DARPA's neurotech, 5G mind control patents, and military acoustic weapons. The difference is in intent, origin, and spirit. A machine built to restore the breath of God into cells will bring peace. A machine built to hijack, sedate, or modify human behavior carries a counterfeit signal, the frequency of the beast. And this is why discernment is absolutely critical, as not every frequency healer is on the same light. Some channel new age spirits, some open portals that cannot close. But when used in prayer with humility and under the direction of the Holy Spirit, the Rife Machine becomes something profound, not just a tool of healing, but a cleansing fire, a way to drive out what medical systems misdiagnose and churches often ignore. I believe every church should have one of these things if they work. Jesus said, greater works than these shall you do. Perhaps he saw the moment when a remnant would arise, and not just with theology, but with the power to rebuild the temple at the cellular level, to cast out what afflicts, not with exorcism rituals alone, but with the sound of creation restored. And in that sound, bodies will heal, spirits will flee, and the breath will return. Suppression does not kill truth. It merely buries it until it becomes seed. And when Royal Raymond Rife's discoveries were torn from the medical establishment by force and fraud, they did not vanish it into oblivion. They tried. They were carried underground, not by corporations or governments, but by the very people whom the system had failed. Engineers, believers, tinkerers, naturopaths, and desperate families become the new stewards of the forbidden fire. That fire passed not through universities, but through inheritance, through legacy, through blood, and into the hands of a man named Matthew Rife. Matthew is not simply the great-nephew of Royal Rife. He is the embodiment of a generational reckoning, one who refused to let the lies of the 20th century bury the hope of the 21st. He did not set out to become a disruptor. He set out to heal his family. But in doing so, he unearthed a treasure long hidden, Rife's principles, designs, and frequencies, many preserved only in scattered documents, whispered testimonies, and outlawed machines. Unlike the early adopters of Rife's tech, who often moved in secret, Matthew chose exposure. He began speaking publicly, offering the machine to those in need, sometimes free of charge. And he wasn't selling snake oil, he was offering the inheritance of a healer. And in return, he received not just support, but scrutiny. Phone calls from the FBI, warnings, surveillance, the system, the whole shebang. The system, it seemed, had not forgotten what his family name meant, nor forgiven it. So why the FBI? Why the federal interest in a device supposedly debunked a century ago? Because Matthew's work doesn't just threaten pharmaceutical revenue. It threatens monopoly of method. It undermines the sacred status of the lab coat. It reawakens the memory of healing is older than hospitals, and that families, not bureaucracies, are the true custodians of health. All we have to do is just find out what the right frequencies are and then play songs to that frequency, tune your instruments to that frequency. This isn't theory anymore. Stories now emerge daily. Autistic children are speaking. Tumors are shrinking. Seizures vanishing. Chronic pain dissolving. Families report not just improved symptoms, but miraculous reversals. So these machines are not sold as magic. They are offered as tools, humble, tunable, frequency-based instruments of restoration. But when you give one to a praying mother or a faithful father, when you couple science with spirit, you get more than just healing. You get revival. And that's what's happening now, I believe. Not a medical trend, but a remnant uprising. Uprising in living rooms all across the country. Modern day Rife machines are humming besides Bibles, not beside degrees. And Christian homesteaders use them alongside anointing oil. Deliverance ministers experiment with frequencies that calm demonic manifestation. Autistic children who cannot speak for themselves find stillness. And the sick feel warmth where there was once cold despair. The underground is no longer just tinkering and tinkerers. It is the body of Christ, armed with knowledge the beast tried to erase. And once again, like in the time of Jesus Christ, healing is seen as rebellion. Because healing without permission is the greatest threat to the system. It breaks the code of dependence. It undermines the priesthood of pharma. And it dares to say that Jesus plus knowledge is enough. Matthew Rife stands at a node, as a node, perhaps even a prophet within the growing underground. And his work is not without danger. He is not protected by legal shields, but neither was Paul. So what's the difference? Matthew is surrounded by a digital church, a chorus of testimonies, and a growing network of the healed. And the Rife machine has been resurrected, but it's not being revived by corporations or patents. It's being revived by fathers who refuse to let their children be sacrificed to the system, by mothers who will not trade prayer for Prozac, by families who have remembered that the temple of God begins at the dinner table and that healing is the birthright of the faithful. This is not just science restored. This is Exodus technology, a frequency-based deliverance for a generation enslaved by Babylon. And Jesus said, "Come out of her." And the pharaohs, yeah, they're watching. And there is a reason Satan fears sound. Because before there was light, there was a voice. And God said, the first act of creation was not a flash, it was a frequency. And if the breath of God formed the heavens, and the frequencies he embedded into creation remain encoded in the very bones of matter. This is why Jesus didn't heal with potions. He healed with speech, with command, with resonance. Talitha koam, which means come out of him, be opened. Every miracle was an act of vibrational alignment. He spoke and matter obeyed. Frequencies, after all, do not argue. They correct. Royal Rife didn't know he was stepping into a prophetic pattern when he discovered mortal oscillatory rates. He was a man of science, not spirit, but his work echoed the voice of God. And he found that every pathogen, every invader, every disease had a signature, a frequency. And when that frequency was matched, when the precise note was struck, it shattered, not the body, but the bondage. And this is resurrection technology. Not in the sense of immortality, but in the principle of it. Dead cells responding to sound. Disease expelled by light. Healed, restored by tuning the temple. It is the blueprint of Ezekiel's Valley of the Bones. Prophesy to these dry bones. God did not say to medicate them. He said to speak, to release breath, sound, frequency, until flesh returned and breath entered again. And this is the hidden power of the Rife machine. It is not just a device, it is a foreshadow. A glimpse of what will come when the sons of God fully awaken and reclaim dominion over the temple of the body and come out of Babylon. When healing is no longer a business, but a birthright. When faith is not merely a belief, but a sound wave carried through action. We are entering an age when believers will lay hands not only with prayer, but with precision. With frequencies will be coupled with faith. When worship will dismantle cancer. And when deliverance ministries will learn the sonic language of freedom. The enemy knows this. And that's why he tried to silence Rife. Not because the machine was dangerous to flesh, but because it was dangerous to the throne of pharmakia and Satan's plans of a new world order. There are no med beds coming, guys. There's no quantum financial system. That's all bullshit. We got to do it on our own. And we need to lift up people like Matthew Rife and support him 100% and pray over his family to keep them safe. Because the resurrection is coming, and it won't just be spiritual, it will be cellular. Jesus is the Word. The Word is vibration. And the vibration is returning. Now, to sum up, the story of Royal Rife was never just about a microscope, a lab, and a machine. was about a man who saw too deeply into a world that was not ready to be healed. And he challenged not just bacteria, but bureaucracy, not just disease, but dominion. And for that, he was erased. But the frequencies he discovered were not. They waited in silence, in exile, in attics and garages and whispered testimonies. Like the scattered bones in Ezekiel's vision, they lay dormant until someone would speak again, until someone would breathe again, until someone would pick up the machine, plug it in, and dare to believe it was not a myth. I believe Matthew Rife is that someone. I believe his work is not the resurrection of a brand. It is the revival of a birthright. The breath of healing has returned, not through institutions, but through inheritance. Not through peer-reviewed journals, but through the hands of a man watching his son get better. Through the prayers of a family refusing to accept the sentence of the system, which we know what Satan does. All he cares about is to steal, kill, and destroy. And through the quiet hum of a frequency generator beside a child's bed, now that machine sings again. The war on Rife was never about science, folks. It was about access, about who gets to heal and who gets to hurt, about whether life is governed by mystery or monopoly. But that war is over now. It's over. And the truth has outlived the lie. And the machine has outlasted the silence. And the bloodline has overcome the gatekeepers. You may silence a prophet, you may discredit a healer, you may bury a machine, but you cannot stop the sound of resurrection once it begins to vibrate again through the body of Christ. So let the world know and be on alert that Royal Rife lives, not in flesh, but in function, not in memory, but in movement, and in Matthew. And in every parent who turns a frequency dial instead of a pill bottle, and every believer who sees sound as sacred, in every testimony that defies the diagnosis, and in every generation that refuses to be tuned to Babylon's frequency of death.
Why do 75% of people feel exhausted all the time? The answer might surprise you. In the 1920s, Standard Oil decided to dive into medicine. They pushed synthetic petroleum into our drugs. Sure, it masked symptoms, but it wrecked our guts. Our good bacteria, which fight off parasites and heavy metals, got wiped out by crude oil. But here's the good news. We can fix this by going back to nature. Introducing Elite Potion, the world's top detox program. It restores your good bacteria by removing toxic threats like aluminum, strontium, barium, and parasites. Imagine feeling energized and alive again. They said there couldn't be a pill that did it all. We invented it. Visit elitepotion.com and reclaim your health from synthetic pharmaceuticals. Your body will thank you.
This has been Cause Before Symptom. I'm your host, James Carner. Tune in tomorrow night when God gives me another revelation to tell you guys all about it. God bless you, God keep you, and God thank you for supporting my show. Go to jamescarner.com, sign up for my award-winning, well, I just mixed that up. Go to jamescarner.com and download my free books. They're yours. Also sign up for my newsletter. And go to elitepotion.com, sign up for my, oh my goodness gracious, Lord heaven, my detox of parasites and heavy metals. And go check out the Royal Raymond Machine. I will put the website on I'll put the link on my website, etc. And I'll be continuously talking to Matthew as we go through this whole process. So God bless you guys, and we will see you tomorrow.